Hello, my name is Jennifer Blakesley. I'm a researcher with Portland State University. I work with the ODHS Youth Transitions team around ILP program evaluation. Today we're going to be reporting findings from our most recent survey to collect feedback from adult supporters. The Youth Transitions team, in collaboration with myself and my team at Portland State, began collecting annual service satisfaction surveys in early 2023. We now repeat the process each year with young people and adult supporters. The questions are mostly the same, but we'll change a few things each year depending on what we want to focus on. Today, we're going to review findings from our third annual round of surveys from earlier this year with the adult supporters. We're going to focus on overall trends over time, exploring how findings compare to what young people say, and identifying areas for program improvement. One thing to note is that throughout this presentation, we'll use the terms young people and youth interchangeably to refer to ILP eligible clients age 14 to 23. This report summarizes 117 responses from adult supporters who were recruited by email in January and February 2025. Of these, 17 had minimal experience or awareness of ILP services in the past year, and these respondents were exited from the survey, resulting in exactly 100 surveys for analysis. Another 35% of the respondents have general awareness of ILP, and they answered a few open-ended questions at the end of the survey. These were mostly permanency workers and resource parents. However, most of the data we'll review today comes from 26% who have extensive experience working with numerous young people accessing ILP services in the past year, and another 35% who have some experience with this. Most of the data reported here reflects 65 adult supporters with some or extensive experience with ILP. 35% of these are permanency workers, all ages, followed by 11% who are teen-specific caseworkers and 20% who are permanency supervisors. The remainder included certifiers, resource parents, and other roles within ODHS child welfare. Note that unlike in prior years, this year we focus on ILP services during 2024 to capture our most recent trends. Also note the Tri-County Portland area accounts for only 18% of the responses, with the rest from across the state and every district represented in the data. So starting with overall experiences with ILP from the perspective of the adult supporters and comparing that to young people, the chart on the left shows the percentage of respondents rating ILP from 1 star or terrible to 5 stars great, based on their perceived understanding of the young person's experience. So the average overall rating for adult supporters was 3.28 out of 5 stars, and relatively few adult supporters, 11%, give it 5 out of 5 stars. On the other hand, you can see on the right, youth generally rate ILP more highly overall, with an average 4.44 out of 5 rating. For young people, half of the respondents give ILP the full 5 stars, and another 32% give it 4 stars. Only 19% give it 3 stars or lower, compared to over half of the adult supporters rate ILP as 3 stars or lower. Next, we asked respondents why they rated ILP the way they did in terms of their impression of youth experiences. Here we categorize responses by whether the adult supporters had positive or negative impressions of youth ILP experiences overall, or whether these were more mixed or neutral. So to start, 26% had only positive things to say about ILP, with no mixed or negative feedback reflected in their response. Many offered brief but positive statements, and the following themes emerged in the longer responses, with a few quotes to illustrate the positive sentiments. For example, some talked about supportive and engaging ILP staff, so saying things like, "My teen clients have gained so much confidence in themselves because they feel heard, validated, and supported." Some talked about how ILP helps young people develop a range of skills for a successful transition, so things like budgeting, job searching, and life skills. Some talked about how ILP connects youth to a range of resources, so things like housing, employment, and education. We also have 44% giving more mixed feedback, reflecting both positive and negative experiences with ILP, or overall neutrality about the benefit of ILP. For example, a few suggest that ILP might be good at some things and less effective in other ways. Here we see respondents talking about enrichment activities versus hands-on skill building, or ILP doing a budget for or with a youth, but not focusing on teaching them to do it themselves. Services can also depend on the ILP worker or the program versus the nature of the service itself. So we have a respondent saying the experience can be all over the board and inconsistent. It depends on the ILP worker and the relationship with the caseworker and the young person. Lastly, we'll talk a bit more about service disruption today, but in these responses, turnover and wait lists were seen as temporary challenges in otherwise good services. Overall, it's not surprising to have 44% of our respondents offering mixed feedback for a service like this, which we know can depend on the context, it can depend on the match between youth needs and the service offered, or factors like whether it's a new ILP program or provider who is still starting up. This is where we see some room for improvement because responses reflect services that can work well, depending on improvable factors that can be focused on. Lastly, we have 30% of the adult supporter respondents who were specifically critical of ILP, with no positive reflections on youth experiences of services. So they talk about insufficient time and resources, that 1 hour a month is not enough, that services are generally considered ineffective, they don't seem helpful, minimal information and support is being provided to young people, and that there are consistent wait lists and turnover. So we are likely seeing the result of ILP staff turnover, new and experienced ILP coaches, and in some districts, new program contractors. New programs can be slow to start up and onboard staff, and that results in longer gaps in services. Compared to the mixed experiences of temporary service disruptions, here we have adult supporters who are saying that this is a consistent and long-standing problem with ILP in their local area. When digging into the most negative comments a bit further, we can also see that these quotes were usually from caseworkers or supervisors with more extensive experience with ILP and who are from districts that have either experienced a change in the contracted program in the past 2 years or where there has been an unusually high degree of turnover in either ILP workers or program supervisors. Each year, we ask adult supporters to rate a list of 12 domains that we expect ILP will be helping young people with, and then we rank these in terms of the percentage who agree or strongly agree that ILP is helpful in this area. This year, we focus specifically on the past year of services. Each row you see on the screen adds up to 100%, and the green and blue sections reflect agreement that ILP is helpful. First, we'll look at the top-rated domains with the most agreement, and we'll look at the lower-rated domains on the next slide. Overall, we did not see any change this year in which of the domains were top-ranked by adult supporters, although the order has shifted a bit. The areas where ILP is strongest is consistent from last year. However, we do see some notable improvement within the high-ranking domains in terms of the degree to which ILP is helpful. For example, agreement that ILP is supporting youth in their employment goals was 64% last time, and it's 83% this time. Helpfulness with education was 67% last time and is now 80%. Help with independent living skills rose from 64% agreement to 78%. Lastly, agreement that ILP supports youth in financial management skills increased from 59% to 74%. This is especially important given the consistent findings in our surveys that this kind of skill building is crucial for our young people. In addition to improvement, we see agreement with what young people said overall. Education, independent living skills, and teaching about available resources were also in the top-ranked domains where young people agree that they are feeling supported by ILP. Next, let's look at the domains ranked in the bottom half. Here we see the other side of the equation. These are the 6 domains with the least amount of agreement and relatively more neutrality or disagreement. The ILP is helpful in these areas. As in past surveys, we tend to see the domains reflecting soft skills and collaboration consistently ranking lower. That said, we do see the same pattern of improvement in these as well, just to a lesser degree. For example, agreement that ILP includes a youth's chosen supports and transition planning increased from 56% to 71% this year. The remainder of the domains also increased to a lesser degree by about 5 to 10 percentage points. The exception is related to ILP helping youth build, repair, and/or maintain supportive relationships. This is consistently revealed in these surveys as an area for improvement, and this year only 37% of the adult supporters agree with this statement. Part of the improvement we see here may be because providers are now hosting regular monthly ILP peer group events, and these inherently help youth develop soft skills by creating opportunities for social connection. Next, we can compare adult supporter and youth responses to better understand how ILP is helping young people. For the first time this year, we gave respondents a checklist of ways that ILP can help young people, along with an open-ended option. Although we asked this question a different way this year, the findings are generally consistent with prior surveys, plus we can compare to what young people say. For the adult supporters, there's a clear pattern focused on ILP sharing information, resources, and guidance. That's a key part of ILP, and you can see that young people also generally agree that ILP is helping in these ways. An area for improvement is the 52% saying that ILP shows them how to do something so they can practice. That's how we describe direct skill building instruction or role modeling. And it's surprising that only half of the adult supporters and the young people who took this survey said that this is something that ILP helps with. So that's an important area for improvement that shows up in other areas of the findings. Lastly, another 9% of adult supporters selected an open-ended option and talked about services like direct financial support, helping young people with moving, and helping youth who have experienced trauma. This year, we have a new question. Based on what young people and adult supporters told us in the first 2 years that we did this survey, we created a checklist of ILP worker qualities and asked which are the most important or their top 3 qualities to have. As you can see, adults were most likely to choose reliable, knowledgeable, and/or communicative as their most important qualities. On the other hand, youth were more likely to choose trustworthy first, but they also had communicative as a second most important choice, followed by knowledgeable and reliable as top choices. So that points to agreement about what youth and adult supporters are needing from ILP workers. Another thing to note, compared to youth, adult supporters were slightly more likely to choose understands and affirms my identity. 32% of young people said this was most important, compared to 35% of the adult supporters here. That may reflect that it's just a smaller number of young people who align with a particular cultural or personal identity that they wanted to have reflected in their work with their ILP worker, where adult supporters may be speaking more generally about this being an important quality within ILP workers. These next questions were specifically asked of the ODHS caseworkers who responded to the survey to assess satisfaction with some of the collaborative aspects of how ILP and child welfare work together to support youth. Compared to last year, there is consistency in the first question on the left. About the same percentage are saying that ILP offers a range of skill building activities, with an increase to 78% agreeing or strongly agreeing this year, compared to 73% last year. For whether ILP clearly documents services they are delivering, there is a slight increase to 77% agreement this year, compared to 73% last year. Lastly, for whether ILP engages the youth's family, resource parents, providers, and others, there's a notable decline this year. Last year, we had 88% agreement, with 46% strongly agreeing that this was true. This year, 76% agree, and only 19% strongly agree. The takeaway here is positive overall, as far as some improved perceptions of service offerings and documentation with ILP, but there's room for ongoing improvement. This is paired with a perceived need for ILP to more proactively engage with the young person's larger support network. Next, we ask about collaboration between ILP and caseworkers around transition planning and permanency. Starting from the left, you can see that 66% of caseworkers agree or strongly agree that they are invited to ILP-facilitated transition planning meetings, and 76% say that they participate. So we have room for improvement both in whether they are invited and whether they are able to participate overall. Next, we have the vast majority, 83% of caseworkers agreeing that they invite ILP to hearings or otherwise keep them in the loop. And this is up slightly from last year. The same goes for making sure ILP understands the youth's permanency goals, with 100% agreement among those who said that this question was applicable to their role with ODHS. Lastly, most caseworkers feel like they know eligibility criteria for things like ILP skill building services, discretionary funds, subsidy, and ETV, and they are able to share these resources with youth. About 26% do not feel like they understand or share these resources, compared to 13% who did not know last year. This is an area where additional training and information continues to be developed and shared statewide. Importantly, only 17% say they do not know where to find information about these ODHS resources, and ILP providers and youth transitions continue to offer trainings and demonstrations and, upon request, can attend local meetings to share this kind of information. Further technology development to support staff and adult supporters continues, including building out the ILP portal, the external website, and the Youth Advocates Team's site. Compared to last year, frequency of face-to-face ILP meetings is improving. Although weekly meetings are rare at 2%, these were occurring at about the same rate as last year. But the percentage saying meetings were happening 2 to 3 times per month increased from 9% to 16%, and monthly meetings increased from 58% to 66%, likely due to a decrease of respondents indicating the ILP was meeting less than monthly or not at all. This was 30% last time, and it's now down to 16%. The increase in meetings 2 to 3 times per month also reflects greater utilization of the ILP Plus services that can be offered to youth who could benefit from having more skill building time with their ILP provider each month. For knowledge of community resources, there is continued improvement from prior surveys. For example, the percentage who said the ILP is very knowledgeable about community resources went from 42% last year to 51% this year, because fewer respondents felt the ILP workers were only somewhat knowledgeable. That went from 48% to 40% this year. That said, the percentage who said the ILP workers are not knowledgeable is about the same, 9% this year compared to 10% last year. Next, regarding engagement skills, we ask overall, how well do ILP workers build relationships and engage with young people? The percentage who indicate that ILP engages young people very well increased this year from 35% to 43%. The 12% who said that ILP does not engage youth very well were asked to say a bit more, and respondents talked about ILP workers being too overburdened and generally unavailable beyond the minimum 60 minutes of skill building each month. They also talked about the related challenges of staff turnover and lack of knowledge among newer staff. Each year, we also ask adult supporters if they have young people who they work with who are eligible but are not receiving ILP skill building services to identify the barriers. The reasons given this year are consistent with last time, although there is a notable reduction in the percentage who said that the youth they work with no longer wanted to participate in ILP due to staff turnover. That went from 27% last year to 20% this year. Next, we ask a series of housing-specific questions of caseworkers, and only those who indicated that any of the young people they work with had recently accessed housing support, subsidy, or Chafee housing through ODHS. 35 of the adult supporters answered these questions. The first questions are regarding information about housing program rules and expectations, because this is an area where we see young people and adult supporters having a different perspective. So first, keep in mind that 87% of young people say their ILP worker did provide this information. 13% said that they did not. But looking at the caseworker responses, we can see on the left that only 63% of them feel that they do this, and they're even less likely at 53% to think that ILP workers do this. However, this is an improvement from last time, which was only 48%. However, both groups also say that when this doesn't happen, it's often because it's a new ILP worker who doesn't yet understand housing programming themselves, so they may be providing incomplete or inaccurate information to young people. Or it's because young people may not fully understand the expectations, even if they are well explained, and they therefore may still feel unprepared for the reality of living on their own. Compared to what caseworkers said last year, they are slightly more likely to feel that youth are able to afford housing. This is up to 41% from 39%. Even if they are not setting aside any savings, this is up to 45% from 42%. And overall, fewer respondents are saying young people are unable to afford housing this year. It's 14% this year compared to 19% last year. Note that this question is one where we tend to see young people generally agreeing with caseworker perceptions. The takeaway here is more about the 14% who do not have a living arrangement that is affordable and within their budget, and they're not able to save. This suggests that a portion of young people need more support in the planning phase to exit foster care and to explore independence. Regarding what skills are still needed for young people to successfully and independently maintain their living arrangement, you can see that budgeting is here at the top at 89%, which is slightly lower than what caseworkers said last year, which was 94%. Youth agree that this skill is missing and that they also rank it first, but only 70% say it's something they still need to develop. Compared to youth, caseworkers were far more likely to select all of these, but the pattern of which skills are still needed is the same, especially budgeting, mental health, employment skills, and transportation. The takeaway is that these are the top skills that are needed from both perspectives. We also asked more specifically, how could ILP better support young people in maintaining their living arrangement? We asked this as a checklist this year based on what caseworkers and young people consistently said when asked for open-ended feedback in prior surveys. Again, as you can see, the financial skills domain in general is at the top of requested support, and we have general alignment between young people and caseworkers in terms of how these are ranked in order of importance. That said, youth were less likely than adult supporters to say that ILP can help with these. For example, 69% of adult supporters say that ILP can help youth more around finding employment, compared to 38% of young people who say this. For budgeting specifically, it's identified by 74% of the adult supporters and 31% of young people. The remaining slides cover suggestions for improving the ILP program overall, starting with how programs and individual providers work with other interest holders, particularly caseworkers and resource parents. Each year, we ask adult supporters about the effectiveness of ILP's communication related to young people that both parties are working with. We have consistent but slight improvement from last time. A few more respondents said very effective instead of somewhat effective, and a few more said somewhat effective instead of not effective. Each year, we ask for suggestions to improve communication. This year, there were 33 responses, and 9% were entirely positive about ILP communication. However, the most common request was for more frequent and/or timely communication, including more regular and proactive check-ins. A related need was more comprehensive information sharing about the progress and status of ILP services and skill building, not just when the MSPR is due or when approval is needed. Some stress the importance of involving caseworkers in the ILP support process, including service planning and decision-making well in advance of transition plan meetings. A few touched on the need to verify information provided by youth to avoid triangulation and enabling that is not in the youth's best interest. Lastly, a few mentioned the need for timely completion and sharing of transition plans specifically. We also ask about how ILP workers could better understand the specific adult supporter roles they interact with. First, caseworkers want to be considered and consulted as key figures in youth support. Similarly, resource parents ask to be treated as partners in supporting ILP skill building. Various roles want ILP workers to understand that they are part of a larger support team with helpful youth background and guidance to offer to support ILP services. Lastly, various roles want ILP to understand that they are expecting ILP to provide hands-on skill building to young people. This year, we gave adult supporters a checklist of potential ways ILP could be improved. You can see that over half want ILP to develop a better plan or roadmap for what services they are focusing on. And generally, these steps should be reflected within a young person's transition plan. When we asked young people this same question, they also had this as one of the higher ranked improvement areas. Next, 47% of the respondents want to see more meaningful engagement with young people. On the other hand, young people themselves had this ranked more towards the bottom at 21%. 44% of the adult supporters want ILP to be more knowledgeable about the local resources that are available to meet a young person's goals and needs. In comparison, youth had this at 35%, so they both ranked this relatively highly. In the middle, we see things related to service coordination and communication with adult supporters, which is always an area for improvement in this kind of work. Lastly, another 9% wrote in their own suggestions, and these were primarily related to wanting ILP coaches to be better trained and to spend more one-on-one time with youth while focusing more on skills training. Lastly, we asked adult supporters about their overall impressions of ILP services as a whole. Here we broke down the longer responses into the different themes they talked about. Overall, we categorized 85 relevant quotes from the respondents into themes and sub-themes. The percentages are approximate here since a response could fit within more than one theme. So first, we have almost half of the quotes related to the impact or the benefit of ILP services. This includes the impression of ILP services as valuable, even despite the challenges in delivering services that are consistently great. Many respondents began their feedback by affirming that ILP is a much needed or invaluable resource when it is working well. As one person says, as a whole, ILP is a wonderfully beneficial program, and when operating to its full potential, it is great. Next, this perceived benefit can depend on the individual ILP worker's knowledge and engagement skills. As one person says, it is beneficial to youth when they have an ILP worker they can connect with and feel supported by, someone that is knowledgeable. Once engagement is established, there has to be practical skill building beyond the fun activities or just connecting to resources without teaching young people how to do things themselves. One person asked for more one-on-one time to address substantive skills and life needs. Another raises an important point, saying the youth does not need another ILP whitewater rafting trip or safari park trip. The youth needs to know how to make spaghetti and keep the lights on. That said, several skills can be taught during an experiential learning event in the community, including safety skills, engagement with peers, and building a natural support system. The area for improvement may be making sure that these different skill building strategies are more effectively balanced across programs. Next, we have about 25% of the quotes talking about program stability and capacity as the critical barrier to consistent services. First, there are impressions of a constant churn of ILP staff in some areas. Respondents may understand the reasons, but still see the impact on service quality for young people. As one person says, ILP is good when kids get connected. Turnover kills the service for kids. Beyond disruption for youth when an individual ILP worker leaves, services can be unavailable for long periods in some areas when programs change or simply experience long periods of instability. As one person says, we're still in a rebuilding stage after a year with the new provider. They've had so much turnover and no services for youth. Another talks about a youth losing interest in ILP due to these kinds of delays. We want to note that with legislative investment being implemented in 2026 and the statewide ILP rate study, Youth Transitions is optimistic that programming can become more stable and effective for young people. Lastly, we have about 20% of the comments talking about systemic issues like coordination between ILP and child welfare, the performance of contracted programs in different counties, and how well ILP is resourced overall. So first, you can see that feedback is polarized around how consistent collaboration is or is not. Some respondents describe great teamwork and others struggle with basic communication. But we know that strong local relationships are imperative to successful service delivery. Respondents also noted that the level and quality of service can vary greatly across counties depending on the program as well as the individual provider. As one respondent notes, in some areas in Oregon, ILP services can do so much more to serve our youth. Lastly, some noted resource challenges and specifically talked about the monthly structure of the program for most youth. Many commenters are familiar enough to understand the reasons behind worker turnover, and they want ILP to be better resourced so that youth get better services and so ILP workers are not stretched so thin that they eventually leave. Thank you for listening. You can find the full Youth ILP Satisfaction Survey findings wherever you found this video from the Youth Transitions team. Questions about the specific findings or the data analysis can be directed to me at the email on the screen. All other questions can go to the ODHS Youth Transitions team. Thank you.